but not to both. Please contact the assessing department for more information. Please direct all testimony to this board and not to anyone in the audience. If you have questions, they are to be directed to the board, and we will get them answered. When directing testimony to this board, please announce your name and address clearly for the record. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. If you need to have a conversation, please feel free to step out into the hallway. Ms. Cameron, are there any changes to today's agenda?
There are not.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Is there a motion to waive the reading and approve the minutes of the non-public and public Board of Assessors meeting minutes from August 1st, 2019, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
I'll second.
Are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the Board of Assessors decision report from the Thursday, August 1st, 2019 meeting as presented?
So moved.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. New business. Ms. Kleiner, Administrative Services Director, is going to provide us with a division update. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. So you have in front of you a memo containing most of this information, but for the public that may be watching, I'll discuss it briefly. So the first item that you also received attached to the memo is the assessing department's new monthly newsletter. We will be issuing this newsletter monthly. People may subscribe by going to the assessing department page on the city website. The intention is to keep residents informed during the full measure and list and reval. Also to include important dates and deadlines, notice of changes, and updates within the department, and general information to increase transparency regarding the overall assessing function. Any questions related to any items in the newsletter can be emailed to assesshelp@nashua.nh.gov. On Tuesday, September 3rd, some members of the assessing department and the IT department, those that are working on the Patriot Assess Pro upgrade, will meet with Patriot's implementation team. The project's on schedule. Discussion will focus at this meeting on the project timeline going forward, training schedule, and how it will integrate with other city software. The first introductory training session for all of the assessing staff will be split between September 4th and September 5th, approximately 2 hours each day. As you know, the Board of Aldermen approved the bonding request to fund the full measure and list and reval at their meeting on August 13th. Attached and on your desk today is a copy of the request for proposal, the RFP, which was released yesterday. We obtained a list from the New Hampshire Department of Revenue website of over 20 firms that are certified to do business in New Hampshire and informed them of the RFP. The bid may be found on the city website. Also on your desk this morning, we apologize for probably the overload of information. You'll find our new procedural manual. Inside, the manual is divided into 2 sections: the administrative staff function and the function of the assessors. We welcome any questions the board may have. I want to thank all the staff for their time and their dedication. This was a big process, and for the help and the guidance of experts that assisted us along the way. Please know that this is a living document. There will be updates and additions as needed. Due to the cost of preparing these binders, there will be one copy of the manual for public viewing at the assessing counter. The administrative staff and assessors have a considerable workload in front of them. Building permits, spring reviews, scheduled inspections, sales reviews, abatement appeals, and software training, just to name a few. They should be commended for their accomplishments. I want to thank the board for your help, your continued support and oversight, and as always, please feel free to call me if there are any concerns.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Are there
you.
any questions for Ms. Kleiner?
No?
All right, is there a motion to accept and place on file the email from Lori Ortolano to Paul Bergeron dated August 12th, 2019?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to accept and place on file that communication. I'm not going to speak to the motion at this time, but I may have some comments to make at the end of the meeting on the agenda item for comments by members of the board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, on to staff items. And the first person on the agenda is Douglas Dame, the commercial assessor, one of the two commercial assessors for the city. Good morning, Mr. Dame. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Hansberry. I'm fine, thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning to members of the board. This morning, I have a list of denials representing work left over, 2018 abatements that were not settled over the summer months. And roughly the breakdown of these requests for denials, they include 22 PSNH abatements which have not been settled. This is part of an ongoing litigation with the PSNH that is in the courts and being handled by the legal department. Also, we have 16 abatements from Law Realty and State Street Realty. It is the Law family, transportation and storage entity here in Nashua. I was hopeful that we could have made some progress on these during the summer months, yet I was informed in the earlier part of August that their appraiser is still working on the list of appraisals. So pending completion of his reports, we have to formally deny them at this time, and they will go to an appeal and be worked on in the future months, in the fall and thereafter. That leaves 5 other abatements that are assorted abatements with entities which I have been in discussion with or have received information on in the past, and we're still working on resolution of those matters. One of the 5 I'm very close to resolving, a veterinary clinic that is appealed located in South Nashua, and the other 4 I will endeavor to continue working on these in the fall as well. So with respect to the total of 43, I'm recommending denials at this time.
Are there any questions?
No.
No questions.
Okay, is there a motion to deny the abatements for properties located at various addresses in Nashua, New Hampshire, per the attached list?
So moved.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Does that conclude your report?
It does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, we have Mr. Greg Turgis, the other commercial assessor for the city. Mr. Turgis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Board. The first one I have is 322 Amherst Street. Is there any questions on that?
Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions on that.
No, I'm familiar with the building. I don't have any questions.
So the building was purchased by Mr. Tong in 1999. He sold it 2.5 years later in 2002. and nearly tripled his investment. And now it's 17 years later, and that same building is worth less than it was worth in 2002?
Generally speaking, yes, in 2002, the market was strong, but that gentleman also had put a fair amount of money into the building.
And then, it's just a two-story building, but the lack of an elevator has a significant impact on the value?
Correct, yeah. It's pretty standard these days to have an elevator in the building. It does limit your clientele, and there's no, the woman that owns it now has no intention of putting in any type of a stair lift. And it significantly impacts the clientele that you're able to rent to. And people just expect an elevator in a two-story building.
And does it have anything to do with ADA requirements?
I couldn't speak to that. I don't know what ADA requirements are as far as the building itself.
And is this, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, is this something that would be the case nationally, or is it because the northern New England states, I believe Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are the three oldest states in the country, and does that have a bearing on the lack of an elevator because we have an older population, or this would be consistent across the country?
I don't know.
Don't know. I mean, based on the CMA that you did, it seems representative of what's happening on the national market. So, and particularly two-story office buildings without an elevator just aren't increasing in value at all then.
I feel that the lack of an elevator significantly, like I said, it's standard and expected in not having that. The property itself, for April 1st, 2018, lacked a tenant. She had trouble finding a tenant because it was a second-floor unit. She has since found a tenant, but at a significantly lower rent because of that situation.
I read it was a while ago, but that's the second most heavily traveled road in the state of New Hampshire, so you would think that that would be a sought-after location. Okay. All right, so is there a motion relative to the property located at 322 Amherst Street?
I'll make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to approve the abatement for 322 Amherst Street.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The second one I have is also, much like Mr. James, various lists of addresses that we have not reached resolution at this point, and I am recommending formal denial of them.
Any questions on that?
No
No,
questions.
no questions.
So is there a motion to deny the abatement request of various natural properties per the attached list?
I'll make a motion to deny the abatement requests for the list as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Mr. Turgis?
The last thing I have is a warrant for timber that was cut. Ms. Cameron has the paperwork that needs to be signed by the board. It is for property owned by Harris Preserve Homeowners Association.
Any questions on that?
No.
No.
So, Mr. Turgis, those homes are privately owned, correct?
Correct.
And then the people who live on that street, there's a parcel of land that's held in common, is that what the story is?
I believe that is correct, yes.
There's a neighborhood off of Ridge Road that has a similar situation, where there are individual homes, they're not part of a condo association, but there's a parcel of land that's held in common by the homeowners on that street. This is not a very common situation, is it?
It is not.
How big a piece of land is that?
I don't have it in front of me. It should be on the intent to cut.
Okay.
18.3 acres.
So is that land that could be sold off and developed in the future? Is it developable land?
I would have to research it. My assumption is that it is their green space. It was their density requirement for the other homes. That is my assumption. I don't know for sure. I would have to research that.
Okay. All right, thank you. So is there a motion relative to the wood lot warrant?
I'll make a motion to accept the adjustment for the wood lot as proposed.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Does that conclude your report?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So next, we move on to unfinished business, and that's going to be addressed by Mr. Gary Turgis. Good morning, Mr. Turgis, how are you?
Good morning. I've had better days, but good morning.
The floor is yours.
The property that I have was a property that was tabled back on the meeting of June 27th. It's regarding 14 Massasoit Road. Myself and my colleague Mike Mandiel went to the property as requested at that meeting to do an inspection of the garage and the home. And in the process of doing that, we found some data changes and data corrections and are recommending a assessment update. We came up with a market value of $367,000. Equalized assessment is $347,900. Does the board have any questions regarding this property?
Any questions?
Yes, Gary, do you know what the data corrections were? What did they involve?
I do have the data corrections. The following errors were found. Patio, a canopy, and an unfinished attic were removed. A half bathroom was added. Portion of the interior walls is plywood paneling. A 12 by 19 section of the first floor was not heated and was therefore changed to an enclosed porch. And the label and condition of the detached garage was changed from average to poor. In addition, it was noted that many of the windows are fogged, the frames are rotted, and windows and frames need to be replaced. The soffits are completely rotted and need replacement, as do portions of the siding. The electrical system, although updated in some areas, is mostly low voltage wiring that requires updating, and these conditions issue warrant additional depreciation. These above data corrections and depreciation lowered the assessment from $396,800 to $373,400. We then did a sales analysis on the property and came up with a market value of the $367,000.
Any other questions?
No.
So is there a motion to approve the assessment reduction for the property located at 14 Massasoit Road to $347,900?
I'll make the motion to approve the assessment reduction for the property located at 14 Massasoit Road to $347,900.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Does that conclude the report?
That concludes my report, yes.
Thank you very much. We have an appointment, Mrs. Ortolano, if you would come forward and state your name and address, please.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. Thank you. I want to start off by thanking Ms. Kleiner for making the new manual available at the assessing desk, and hearing that it's going to be a fluid document will afford those of us in the public interested in following along with the process the opportunity to do so. So that's appreciated. I'd like to briefly speak to the abatement we just listened to. That was approved. I think it was very well done. I think it really speaks to some of the issues with the KRT abatement. I'm very happy, Bob, that you asked what were the changes made that you identified and what value did it bring it to. It brought it to the 375, and yet they proceeded to use a sales grid, which took it lower with equalization. And KRT was not willing to do that for us. They took it down, threw away the sales grid that took it to 622, questionably had a home on the sales grid at 4 Elliott because it wasn't a good comp. I asked them to use a better comp and they wouldn't, and then proceeded to say that we weren't worthy of the equalized value, that the $50,000 difference really didn't make a difference because it fell within the 10%. I think it was a really poor job, and I wished we had had the opportunity to negotiate with the city the way Mr. Duran had. And I think he had that opportunity because he's a lawyer, and it was easy to get it done. But our garage was also in very poor shape. That's why Greg came out. He reduced our garage, and that was a $5,000 change, as well as water in the basement was $7,000. So, but that was an amazing discussion on what they found in that home. And I don't know if any of you looked at one Massasoit that sold on that street at the same time that property sold. Had you looked at that, the difference in the properties were startling, and yet the assessments were too close. And one Massasoit, after purchase, pulled a $90,000 permit for a significant increase in square footage and home improvement. So one house was virtually 400, the other was 500, and the difference was night and day. So it concerns me that KRT didn't recognize that with a sales point right on the street.
Excuse me, Lori, do you know how much land one Massasoit has?
I think it's a little bigger than, that street up there, it's off of Indian Rock, and the parcels are all large. I think the one that was Mr. Duran's property was 1.1 or 1.2 acres, and I believe the other one Massasoit, was almost identical.
Oh, this one was almost 2 acres.
Okay, then his was like 1.6. But on the value, Bob, when you look at the land curve value, the difference in pricing makes no difference on that land curve value that KRT used in the statistical model. There's that original size difference that ekes a value, and then it takes off the curve in an exponential format, and you don't see much difference. It levels off, actually, and you don't see much difference. So the land value was not the issue. I did look at that. I want to talk to you just briefly about the contract we had with KRT on the statistical analysis, because that issue came up at the state, and I have looked very closely at that contract now. And what came up at the state, or what was questioned by, I believe, Ms. Walker, was on the capturing of sold properties. Who did the inspections of the sold properties? I don't have the verbatim words. I don't know if there's a record being converted. I haven't listened to the tape again. But it was indicated by KRT that the city primarily did that function, that they were instructed they didn't have to do that. And I don't know if KRT indicated that they did any. I'm not positive of that. But, you know, I feel pretty strongly looking at this report that we did not get contract compliance here, and we paid a lot for it. And specifically, their duties were to conduct sales surveys and establish base rates for buildings and land. Okay, I don't know if the sales surveys were done, but that we could figure out when I get the KRT data. Prepare sales surveys So preparation of the sales surveys to bring out to homes, commercial and residential, was their job. If they're saying it was turned over to the city, I want you to know I went to the city to get the letters that were sent out to buyers, sellers, and brokers, and, you know, in the end, there were none. We did not do that part. Now, Laura and I have pulled up 500 of the roughly 1,200 homes to review each one individually, cross-reference them with MLS, and look for letters. I know in the 150 I'm done with, I believe I found one property that was given a letter by Mike Mandile. So letters in that process of trying to gather data on what went on with these sales properties was just not done. And I'll check the property file on that one to see if the letter's in there, and we'll know if letters make their way to the files. But I think out of 500 properties right now, we're looking at maybe 5 that got letters. Assist the municipality to ensure that compliance with the contract is adhered to, and submit a signed-in-date statement to the DRA attesting to the qualifications of all the levels of the certification to be true, accurate, and correct. I don't see how they assisted us with compliance, because a lot of parts of this are missed. For contract submittal, they were supposed to give a list of the qualified DRA personnel to the state and to the city who are working on the job. One name that kept appearing on the sales review, sales review listing on the property cards was the name Kay Lean. And that person is not on the list to be used by DRA to do the job. And they're not on they're not on KRT's website as a staff member. I have an email up with the state to ask who they are, where they came from, and what their certification is. So I don't know who that is. We can't verify that. Then it says assessments of all properties. The company shall measure, list, and verify all sales. We've already discussed that. They have said that somebody told them they didn't have to do that. But when you're in a contract and you're doing a $500,000 contract, there should have been a addendum or a sign-off that this was not being done by KRT. And no doubt this was built into the cost of the project. And there's no question in my mind that that sales verification was a significant part of the cost, because it takes a lot of time to go to 1,200 homes and verify the data. So that's pretty significant. The completion of the work according to the contract says everything will be turned over to the city, including the CAMA model, on October 1st. So there's been a question regarding the $24 million that was adjusted on October 10th, and who made these adjustments, and was KRT involved? And I'll discuss in a moment what was said at the August 13th meeting, but it appears to me, unless it's written somewhere, that the system was turned over and the city took control of the data by October 1st, and changes made after that were city changes. My observation are those properties that I've identified as questions on the 8th, 9th, and 10th were solely done by the city. That's all I know, because that's all the documentation shows on some of the cards, and once again, the documentation was never complete. So it makes it very hard to have an audit trail. It does say that KRT will provide the municipality, delivered at the end of the project, with property cards and a hard copy, electronic or both, the data collection manual, and all other products deemed necessary by the municipal assessing officials. This was the information I requested for on around the middle of August, to look at that data that was returned. I might find some interesting information regarding properties of interest. I did not know until the Telegraph was called in to run an article that that request resulted in 31,000 pages of documentation. It's regrettable that the city did not let me know that before doing a photo op. Because I'm willing to meet with Celia, I have not had a response to being willing to meet with her to talk about what to take from there, or what's in there. I've called the state and asked them for help on it. I'm just trying, and it looks to me like if they returned a property card, if there was a property card printed for every property, then roughly 29,000 pages of that are property cards that are returned. And that gives you a little different perspective of what I was asking for. So I'm figuring it out by talking to KRT. Again, personnel is highlighted again, that it's approved officials, certified DRA, and we have somebody that we don't know. I'm not certain if they met the obligation to keep somebody on site in Nashua for 75% of the time. Again, it highlights in the details that the company shall visit each commercial, industrial, and residential property sold between April 1st, 2017 to March 31st to verify existing data and conditions of the sale. The company shall make an attempt to inspect the property. If unsuccessful, leave notification requesting that they call or deliver a letter. They are to arrange interior inspections to estimate the value of improvements using the best evidence available. It looks to me like the best evidence that was used by the city was the MLS listings. But I'm going to tell you, when we complete that spreadsheet of 500, there was a lot of missed information when you cross-reference. There's a lot of missed information. The other thing is that the company, it says the company shall provide the city a complete copy of the field data collection cards, worksheets, and documents. This is noted repeatedly in the contract. The other thing is the city was the KRT was responsible for photographing all the principal buildings and photographing all the sales properties if there were significant changes in them. I can tell you, looking at the 500 property cards, that probably 475 have no photo on the property card at all. I know the 150 I've just completed, I think only 3 had photographs. I can't speak for Laura's exactly, but I know it's very low. They never took pictures. They never put them on the card. And this was a question of mine. I kept looking at files. I've looked at a lot of them. Why don't we update photos? When we go out, why don't we get the photos and update them? I can tell you, as a resident who looks at them, it's really helpful to have the photo, because you may have the idea in your mind of what the property is but not know the address. And when you bring something up, you can say, oh yeah, that's the property I'm looking for. But they did not do that. It said the city would provide the company a copy of all property transfers for a minimum of 2 years preceding the effective reevaluation date of April 1st, 2018. That's really interesting to me, because I wondered how they look at sales and transfers of properties that happened before the 1-year time frame that they used to create their model. You know, I can tell you the sale of our home in 2013 in December, after reevaluation was done, it didn't have any impact on the neighborhood. It was never used in a model. It was never considered, and it didn't affect sale price because we bought it pretty substantially inflated value. So what happens to these sold homes like the Corzinis in 2016? You know, their data should have been in here to say, okay, they went up and they went up again, and we took them to the very top. What about the other properties next to them? They were never adjusted. So I don't believe, I want to see the data that we provided for these property transfers, and most likely that would be in the box.
A couple more minutes, okay?
Yes. A compilation of unqualified property transfers with the appropriate notation. I don't know if KRT produced that data. The market analysis used to indicate unit values with the documentation of the methods employed and any special adjustment factors. That was to be provided under the analysis section. The field review, the 100% property field review parcel by parcel, we believe was the drive-by. The company was supposed to ensure that all properties are valued at their highest and best use values. Any supporting documents provided or utilized by the company in the process: rental expense statements, questionnaires, company cost estimates, sales listing sheets, final review notes, shall be relinquished to and become part of the municipality. That would be in the data. Here's where the company shall update the existing digital image files by taking new photos of each improved property. They should be at least 6 megapixels and shot from the street. We didn't get that. The building cost tables were supposed to be adjusted by KRT and there's a long section on that, but justified. So we have a building cost issue with building code, we have a base rate table issue with building code 72. That box should tell us what the justification was for that data. Okay, this is a big one for me.
I'm
and-
going to ask you to wrap up, Mrs. Otto.
Sure.
This one, all right?
You know, could I ask you if you would consider holding a workshop for the public so we could speak to you about some of these issues without having our 15-minute time frame? You know, you sat up at the DRA, or Bob did. There's a lot of issues on the table. I brought forth a lot of documentation that I wasn't able to get answered down here. We're putting together the whole sales report for the state because I can't give it to you. But it would be helpful if you would consider having a hearing with the public. And I know I could get about 10 or 12 people out here that would speak to you about some of these specific issues, and I think it would be worthwhile. This is really important, and I would like to request, this one I'll just speak to, the final values for the assessments, for the reevaluation numbers, were supposed to be posted on the company website. They never produced final values. That has bothered me tremendously. I am shocked that an appraisal company wouldn't want to control or know what their valuations were. The website posted the numbers at the beginning of September on the first cut, but then they held all those meetings where people could have second reviews, and values were changed. And I kept going back to that website to look if the changes were made, and they weren't. And I spoke to Kim Kleiner repeatedly about how can I figure out what the final numbers are, because I was trying to understand what happened in May when I discovered the $24 million reduction. What were KRT's final numbers? And the only way I could figure out how to do that was to put in the right to know for the 1,252 mailings that went out after the second review, and make an Excel spreadsheet of all of those files, which Laura and I did, and put in all the data to see what the changes were. Now we feel we have a complete database, but those changes to the 13 cards are not in there. So that is a very big issue to me. The other one is the informal reviews.
Mrs. Ortolano? Thank you very much.
Yes, I hope you'll consider my request to set up a hearing for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, comments by board members?
If I may,
Mr. Bergeron?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to address the communication sent by Mrs. Ortolano, or asked by Mrs. Ortolano to be placed on our agenda today. First, I want to apologize to Mrs. Ortolano for not responding sooner to that email. She asked that it be placed on our agenda about 10 days after the email was sent. I just wanted to explain to her and to the board why I chose not to respond immediately. This was concerning an abatement request which the board acted upon during its last meeting. The abatement request was denied, and the homeowner now has an opportunity to appeal that decision if he or she wishes to do so. Since this was a board matter, I felt that I shouldn't act independently without the other members of the board knowing what my response might be. By placing this on the agenda now, the full board is aware of the issue. I also would point out that I didn't feel that I could communicate or forward this email communication to other members of the board, because in doing so, I felt we would probably be discussing board matters outside of a public forum by electronic communication, and that would have been a violation of the state's right to know law. So first, my apology for the delay, and I hope my explanation will at least clarify why I could not respond immediately. As to the content itself, just make it clear that I'm very open to networking and professional development and look for opportunities to expand my knowledge of the Board of Assessors' responsibilities. In this particular case, since the matter is still subject to appeal, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to talk to Mr. Rice, but perhaps at the Municipal Association meeting or some other venues, we may have an opportunity to share ideas and I can become better informed in the future. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Early.
No comments.
I'd like to address one issue. At two public meetings recently, one at the in front of the National Board of Aldermen and then one in front of the DRA, there was a statement made that the board may have conducted a meeting last October in violation of the right to know law, the public meeting law, and I just wanted to address that. There was a meeting that was held between the department and KRT back in October. And prior to that meeting, each member of the Board of Assessors was asked if they would be interested in attending that meeting. They were welcome to attend. And two of the board members did not attend. I was the board member who attended, but it was a meeting that was held between our department and KRT. It was not a meeting of the Board of Assessors. I was the only person who expressed an interest in attending the meeting, and I was present, so there wasn't a quorum of the board present, so there wasn't any violation of the right to know law, public meeting law. In fact, at the subsequent Board of Assessors meeting held on October 18th, at the top of page 2, in the minutes, I was very clear that I had actually attended that meeting. It said, Mr. Hansberry said that he had attended a meeting between assessing department staff and KRT appraisal last Thursday, October 11th, 2018. So I was completely within the law in attending that meeting, and we were completely within the law as a department and as a board by not posting that meeting because it was not a meeting of the Board of Assessors. And to give you an example of how closely we follow the right to know law, there was an Assessing 101 workshop that was offered to the public, and we were asked by the department, it's just Mr. Early and I were on the board at the time, there was a vacancy, if we were going to attend that, and we both said that we would attend that meeting, and even though we just sat there as the members of the public did and listened to the presentation and did not discuss any board business at all, the meeting was posted, indicating that because there was going to be a quorum of the board present, we wanted to make certain that we were in compliance with the public meeting law, and we follow both the spirit and the letter of the law when it comes to abiding by the public meeting law and the right to know law, and I just felt that people should know that. Okay, and there's a need for a non-public session, correct?
Yes.
Lina?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, before you enter into non-public, I wanted to address next Thursday's meeting. So at the moment, we have nothing on the agenda for that meeting. We will have items for your meeting later in the month, and we feel that we can address those then, but we wanted to see what the board's feelings were on holding that meeting with no items on the agenda.
There's no business to act on. It doesn't really serve a purpose to hold the meeting unless
No,
you gentlemen are in
I
disagreement.
concur with that.
I agree as well.
So it would be the 19th of September would be the next meeting then?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right.
So if the board agrees, we can go ahead and post cancellation
Yes.
of that meeting?
Yes, yeah. All right, so is there a motion to go into non-public session for matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of this board, unless such person requests an open meeting? This exemption shall extend to include any application for assistance or tax abatement or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant pursuant to RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, parenthetical C.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Mr. Bergeron? Roll call to go into non-public.
My apologies. Aye.
Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry? Yes. All right, so, Ms. Cameron, by my watch, if you would show that we left non-public and left public and entered non-public at 9:01. Is there a motion to seal the minutes and keep them confidential until such time the board deems they should become public information?
So moved.
And I will second.
Mr. Bergeron?
Aye.
Mr. Early?
Yes.
Ms. Hansberry, yes. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to grant the elderly exemptions as recommended per the attached list?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Is there a motion to deny the elderly exemptions as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it, motion carries. Do we have the,
It is the correct address that's on your list.
that is the correct address?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the disabled exemption as recommended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Nay, ayes have it, motion carries. Is there any other business to come before the board? So we will meet tentatively Thursday, September 19th, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. So we're adjourned at 9:07.